I was 5 years old when I was adopted. I had just finished kindergarten when the adoption was finalized. I remember a lot of things from the adoption process. It was me and my older sister. So through foster homes and through everything, I was always with my older sister, who's only 14 months older than I am. So yeah, my name is Danielle Tucker. I am 34. I was in Pensacola, Florida, where I graduated from Brownsville Bible School of Ministry, and we were the last class to graduate. When I was adopted, I remember the adoption process was a little, it was almost like we didn't know what was going on. We knew that we were in a lady's house that was super nice to us. It was me and my older sister, and so she kept saying, you guys are going to have your ERS party, which means we were Tuckers, that was our last name, but we weren't quite Tuckers yet. So we were like Tucks, And then, so when the adoption was finalized, they would have this huge party that would be our ERS party, and that we would be fully Tuckers. And that was all in Cicero, Illinois. As far as what changed from being in the foster home to being adopted, we started going to school. We had our own bedroom, which was kind of interesting because before we would be like in homes where, we were sharing bedrooms and stuff like that and sharing everything. We never had anything that was like our own. And so that was an interesting dynamic. I remember, being adopted and sitting at the table with my new parents at that time, and, me and my older sister would just say thank you, basically thank you for the food, thank you for feeding us. We didn't think anything of it. We were just like, thank you. And I remember my adopted mom looking at us and saying, you guys do not have to thank us for feeding you. This is fine. You're supposed to be fed, and it's okay that we're feeding you. Stop thanking us for feeding you. It was a little bit of an adjustment for sure. And being introduced to my little sister as well was a pretty interesting adjustment. My little sister was not adopted with me and my older sister. My birth mom and my adopted mom were actually friends back in the day. So by the time my little sister was born, my birth mom just literally gave her to my adopted mom now. Again, it's just, it's not something that you think about because it's just like, this is the way that it is. It wasn't until years later that I realized, oh my gosh, this isn't normal. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. And I couldn't help, even at a young age, just having an interest in looking at kids and looking at their parents and how they looked alike. And I thought that was just fascinating to me. I was like, wow, so unique how, they have her chin or, whatever. There was just something that always fascinated me because growing up, we didn't look anything like our adopted mom, at all. None of us did. And so it was just, it was an interesting dynamic that I really didn't have questions about until way later in life, to where I was old enough to understand that something's off here and I don't know what it is. School was kind of hard because moving from Illinois, newly adopted, everything with my new family, moving down to Georgia, just being introduced to all of these people that I didn't know, that were now my family. But yeah, there was a lot of a new school at this point. The only comfort that I had was my older sister. So she was the only one that was there with me through all of it. And gosh, I'm gonna cry. I wasn't prepared for that. But sorry. So if I can stop crying. My older sister was there with me through all of it. And I knew that if she was there, everything was okay. I'm sorry. So my older sister really just looked out for me a lot. She stood up for me on the school bus. And so through the transition, I think that made it a lot smoother. Even though we were being introduced to our cousins that were going to school with us and everything, I didn't really know them. But, I think during that whole transition, I really felt kind of close to my adopted mom, because she began to explain to our relatives different attributes about us that she kind of caught on to being true. It meant so much to me that she would know and have language for that. The end of middle school, early high school, when everything just kind of exploded, when my older sister decided she was going to tell everybody, who our birth mom was, what happened, and just the stigma of all of it just coming into a bunch of, middle school kids, high school kids. It was just not ideal at all. And it just really played itself out in a huge way. Family is people that are going to be there for you. Family are, because so much of today, they want to know, flesh and blood, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, to use a biblical stance. But in reality, at the end of the day, your family are basically those that are going to love you unconditionally, no matter what, through every season of your life. My relationship with the Lord during all of that time was pretty much so non-existent, even though we had moved to the Bible Belt. When I had my second encounter with the Lord, that I would say that I was actually saved, no doubt. I was 15 years old. It was March 29th, 1999. We had just changed churches. It was our first Sunday there. And I knew at that moment, I said, you know what? It'd been a few years, and I remember thinking that if I'm going to do this Christian thing, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all the way, or I'm not going to do it at all. And so at that moment, I made the decision, no, I really do. There's something about this. There's something in this. I want to give my heart, and immediately get involved in the youth group. And their youth group at the time was basically almost bigger than the actual church. And our youth group was on fire for God. They loved God. And it wasn't long, months into it, that I figured out why. It's because they were the youth pastor would take the kids and bring them down to the Brownsville revival, have them get touched and then bring them back. So we just take several trips back and forth. And so it wasn't until that summer that I read my first book on revival, which was from Brownsville Revival by Richard Crisco, called It's Time. And I was blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, there could be more of God, more than than this. And it was at that time that I just started to get a vision for my life. I started to get a vision for the future, because back then I really didn't have a vision. I knew what I wasn't gonna do. I knew that I wasn't gonna be like my family. And that's really, if someone were to ask me, what was your vision, before, I didn't have one. That was all I knew, was that I'm just not gonna be like that. If I'm going to be a mom, I'm not gonna be a mom like that. And if I'm going to have kids, I'm not gonna do it that way. I just knew that that's not the way I wanna do it. And it was this pattern in my family where that's just what happened. My little sister ended up having a baby at 16 years old, 17 years old, And so it was just this cycle. And I'm like, I just don't want that. I don't know what I want, but I knew I don't want that. And then once I got saved, everybody in our youth group was like, ministry, and I didn't think, in all honesty, I didn't know that there were options. I thought that that's what you did. You got saved and you went and preached the gospel, because that's what Mark says to do. Go into all the world and preach the gospel. We all had vision, what we're gonna do and change the world. And so yeah, I would definitely say it wasn't until, after I got saved that I really started to have a vision for my life in God and what he was desiring for me. My identity before I got saved was just, it was incomplete. It was just negative. It was, if somebody did something wrong, it was me. If somebody, didn't do something, it was me. The identity that was formed upon me in a negative light. It was whatever Danielle wants, Danielle does. She does whatever she wants. She doesn't listen to anybody. She's rebellious. But yeah, as far as identity before Christ, I don't really think I had one. I'll be honest, finding out about my origins, my ethnicity, and everything has always been a desire of mine. Because being adopted, it's like there's like a lot of question marks. Unless you've actually met your biological dad, your biological mom, and was able to talk to them, there's always going to be question marks. There's always going to be, because people don't understand. And this is something that this is something that people normally don't realize, is that there's so many things that adopted kids have to go through that normal kids don't, and they don't give any thought to it at all. We've all been born again. We're all of a new family. It's Christ. Christ is our brother. We are the family. Like, God is our father. That's the type of relationship that we have with God. Like, he is our father. Like, we have been born again, adopted in. And so if we're going to have a life movement, if we're going to be about pro-life and have a life movement and adopt kids, then we need to be aware of the things that we're saying. It's like, oh, that's my son and that's my adopted daughter. It's like, no, that's your daughter. You know what I mean? And so even that speaking that identity into those kids and speaking identity into who they are, because ultimately we are all adopted. Adoption to me, I think for me, it means to love somebody unconditionally. It means they're accepted in the beloved, But I think that it's full acceptance, it's unconditional love, it is unreservedly somebody else. Like, you belong to somebody, you're a part of somebody, you're a part of a unit, whether it's a family, parents, like, you are a part of something and of someone. So I think the unconditional thing is really, really key to defining adoption, because a lot of adopted kids don't feel that. That's probably their biggest struggle that they're gonna have to wrestle with. To me, the scripture that says that we've been adopted into the family of God, it means that we have been accepted. We have been born again. And that's the beautiful thing about being born again. Like, when we believe in Jesus, we've been born into a new family. We've been accepted into a new bloodline. We sing it all the time in our songs. We hear, I'm no longer a slave to sin. I am a child of God. His blood runs through my veins. When I first heard that, and I was like, wow, like, that's so true. God, like, your blood runs through our veins because we've been born again. Like, and that reality, that truth becomes so amazing that it doesn't matter what family, whether, Irish or, German, French, Jewish, Arab, doesn't matter. Like, if you've been born again, you've been adopted into a new family. Like, you have an inheritance, because the inheritance that God has for us is so much greater than anything on this earth. It's greater inheritance than the biggest trust fund there is out there. And I think that is so powerful. I mean, my inheritance is now in God, in the creation, and all that He has for us. And it is all throughout the scriptures, all throughout the Word of God. His inheritance for us is amazing. He has a good inheritance. Behold, the lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. Who would I say I am? I would say that My first role and identity before the Lord is a daughter, that I am his daughter. And the shift that happens within the heart of knowing that you belong to God. Not just that, oh, we love him and we embrace him and we have emotional sentiment toward him, but that we actually belong to him. He is our inheritance, but we are his inheritance. First and foremost, I am a daughter of God. That is my identity. Most people ask me, they're like, Danielle, if you were to stand before God at the end of the age, what do you want God to say about you? Like for real, that's how you know what your vision is for your life, what do you want him to say? And I resolved years ago that I know what I want him to say. I want God to be able to look at me and know that I loved him with all of my heart. All of my heart. That nothing was held back. Nothing was reserved, but that I gave all for love.